One of our subscribers named Jordan sent me this story, and the night her parents chose a boat over her ability to walk was the night everything changed. We already put the $25,000 deposit on the boat, Jordan. We can't help you. My father didn't even look up from the model yacht he was polishing. I stood there in their pristine living room, my right ankle wrapped in bloody gauze, holding a $4,500 hospital bill that would determine whether I ever walked normally again. "Dad," I whispered, "it's my leg. The doctor said I need surgery this week." My mother flipped a page in her magazine, bored. "You're an adult, honey. Maybe limping for a few months will teach you to be more careful with that cheap car of yours." From the corner, my sister Ashley laughed. "Just sell your laptop. It's not like your little freelance hobby pays the bills anyway." I looked at the toy boat sitting on the glass table. It cost 5 times more than my surgery. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I turned around and walked out on my broken ankle. That was the moment the daughter died. The creditor was born. My name is Jordan. I'm 28 years old. People love to say family comes first. That night, I realized my family only cared about optics, so I made a plan. I didn't just leave. I came back later, bought their debt, and evicted them from the very house they told me to crawl out of. Have you ever felt like a stranger treated you with more kindness than your own blood? Drop a comment and tell me your story. I'm reading every one. The leather sofa had squeaked under me while I tried to sit without screaming. My ankle was swollen, purple, and pulsing with heat. Blood had already seeped through the fresh gauze. The doctor had been blunt. Surgery immediately or you'll limp for life. Across the room, the scent of expensive candles suffocated me. My father, Dennis, carefully buffed the miniature yacht. "Jordan," he said calmly, "we've already committed to the boat. $25,000, non-refundable." "It's my leg," I said. My mother, Pamela, stirred her tea. "You chose to drive that old car. Actions have consequences." Ashley didn't even look up from her phone. Freelancing doesn't exactly scream stability. I studied the polished floors, the art on the walls, the casual wealth. They had money. They just didn't have any for me. I stood through blinding pain, gripped the armrest, and limped toward the door. No one stopped me. The silence wasn't guilt. It was indifference. When the oak door shut behind me, I stopped being their daughter. I became their liability. Back in my studio apartment, I slid down the wall and stared at my ankle. The pain was sharp. The anger was sharper. To understand why I didn't scream, you need to see the ledger of my life. In my family, love was transactional. Ashley's luxury spa collapsed 2 years ago because she spent investor money on vacations instead of marketing. Dad wrote her a $50,000 check. No contract, no interest, no lecture. Protecting her credit, he called it. When I was 22, I borrowed $2,000 to fix my transmission. They made me sign a notarized agreement, 5% interest. For 6 months, I lived on instant noodles to repay them early. I thought responsibility would earn respect. Instead, it made me convenient. It wasn't about money. It was about hierarchy. They chose fiberglass over bone. That's when I understood. To them, I wasn't family. I was a bad investment. A knock interrupted my spiral. "Jordan, it's me, Caleb." My brother stood there in grease-stained coveralls, eyes red from exhaustion. Caleb worked 60 hours a week as a mechanic. He was the only one who didn't look at me like I was defective. Without a word, he pulled a crumpled wad of cash from his pocket. "It's $500, he said. "I sold my tool set to the new guy. It's not enough, but it's everything I have." My parents had millions. Caleb had nothing, and he gave me everything. "Keep it," I said. "Take it," he insisted. "I can't watch you lose your leg because they're monsters." I took the money, not because it would fix anything, but because I needed to remember who showed up. That night, I made my decision. The next morning, I signed a predatory loan with an interest rate that should have been illegal. I paid for the surgery. I was going to walk again. and when I did, they would pay for every step. 2 weeks later, I sat on my thrift store couch, leg in a cast, staring at lukewarm ramen. The loan payment was due in 3 days. I had $42 in my account. I was calculating whether I could donate plasma while on painkillers when I remembered the lottery ticket in my jeans, a $2 impulse buy at a gas station. I smoothed it out and checked the numbers. Powerball 7. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call Caleb. I just sat in my silent apartment, listening to the refrigerator hum. $12 million. When you hand a starving person a feast, they don't celebrate, they freeze, because abundance feels like a trap. A cold clarity settled over me. If my parents found out, they would suddenly remember how much they loved their independent daughter. They would talk about family unity, about second chances, about how proud they always were. But I had already learned the truth. They only valued assets, and now I was about to become their largest liability. Ashley would suddenly need a business partner. I didn't cash the ticket immediately. Instead, I hired a lawyer. Not a strip mall lawyer, but a corporate shark in a glass tower downtown who charged $800 an hour. I walked into his office on crutches, looking like a vagrant, and placed the ticket on his mahogany desk. I want 2 things, I told him. I want this money put into a blind trust so no one knows my name, and I want a full forensic financial investigation into Dennis and Pamela Miller. 3 days later, I was back in his office. He slid a thick dossier across the desk. I opened it, and the myth of my parents' wealth dissolved into ink and paper. They weren't rich, they were drowning. The mansion on Mercer Island, mortgaged to the hilt. They were 3 months behind on payments and hiding the foreclosure notices. The $25,000 boat deposit put on a credit card with 22% interest. Ashley's successful spa business. It was bleeding cash, surviving only because my father was illegally siphoning equity from the house to cover her payroll. I stared at the red numbers. They had refused me $4,000 to save my leg while they were hemorrhaging $500,000 to save their egos. They weren't just cruel, they were frauds. They were playing a game of chicken with bankruptcy, and they were losing. "What do you want to do?" my lawyer asked. "We can structure your assets to protect you from their creditors." "No," I said, closing the file. "I don't want to run from their debt. I want to own it." I instructed him to form a shell company. We called it Chimera Holdings. With my new capital, I approached the bank that held my parents' distressed mortgage and Ashley's delinquent business loans. Banks hate bad debt. They'll sell it for pennies on the dollar just to get it off their books. I bought it all. Within 48 hours, I went from being the rejected daughter to the owner of their entire existence. I held the deed to their house. I held the lien on Ashley's spa. They were living on my property, spending money they owed me. I signed the final paperwork with a steady hand. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was the predator in the water, and they didn't even know I was swimming beneath them. They thought they were answering to a faceless corporation. They had no idea the Chimera was the girl they told to sell her laptop. The trap wasn't a cage, it was a mirror. I knew my parents better than they knew themselves. I knew that if I approached them as a creditor demanding payment, they would play the victim. They would cry to their friends, start a GoFundMe, and paint me as the villain. But if I approached them as an admirer offering a golden parachute, they would jump without checking if the chute was attached. I hired a lawyer named Mr. Sterling to be the face of Chimera Holdings. He was everything my parents worshipped. Older, British accent, wearing a suit that cost more than my brother's annual salary. He met them at a private lunch club downtown, neutral ground that smelled of old money and exclusion. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I had the audio feed listening from my car parked a block away. Mr. and Mrs. Miller. Sterling's voice was smooth as velvet. Chimera Holdings specializes in distressed assets with high potential. We see the value in your property, and frankly, we see the value in you. I heard the clinking of silverware. My father cleared his throat. that pompous sound he made when he felt important. "Well, we've certainly put a lot of equity into the estate. It's good to see a firm that appreciates quality." "Precisely," Sterling continued. "That's why we're offering a sale-leaseback agreement. We purchase the property and the business debt immediately. You clear your record. No foreclosure, no public embarrassment. You stay in the home as tenants for a nominal fee. Plus, as a signing bonus to help with operational liquidity, we're issuing a corporate credit card with a $50,000 limit." Silence. Then my mother's voice, breathless. "50,000? And we stay in the house?" "It's a standard retention package for our VIP clients." Sterling lied effortlessly. I gripped the steering wheel. This was the moment. The document Sterling slid across the table was 50 pages long. Buried on page 42 was clause 42B. It was a legal guillotine. It stated that as tenants, any violation of the lease terms, including late payment by even 1 hour or unauthorized commercial use of the property, resulted in immediate non-judicial eviction, no grace period, no court hearings, instant termination. A rational person would ask, "What's the catch?" A scared person would read every word. But my parents weren't rational or scared. They were narcissists. There is a specific delusion that comes with being a narcissist, the absolute unshakable belief that the universe owes you a favor. They didn't see a predatory contract, they saw validation. In their minds, of course a hedge fund wanted to bail them out. Of course they deserved a $50,000 spending limit. They viewed luck not as a random occurrence, but as a character trait. They believed they were immune to consequences, because in their version of the story, they were the heroes. Arrogance isn't just a flaw. It's a blindfold. They didn't read the contract because they couldn't conceive of a world where someone was smart enough to trick them. "Where do we sign?" Dennis asked. I heard the scratch of the pen. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut. "Excellent," Sterling said. "Welcome to the Chimera family." As they laughed and ordered a second bottle of wine on their new tab, I took my headphones off. They thought they had just cheated the system. They thought they had found a loophole that would let them keep their lifestyle without paying the price. They didn't realize that the VIP package was just the last meal before the execution. I drove back to my apartment, the signed digital copy of the contract already hitting my inbox. I opened it and scrolled to the signature line. Dennis Miller, Pamela Miller. They hadn't just signed a lease, they had signed a confession of their own greed. The clock was ticking, and I was the only one who could hear it. Thanksgiving at the Miller household was never just a dinner. It was a stage play designed to showcase how perfect their lives were. But this year, fueled by the Chimera Holdings credit line, it was a coronation. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, picking at my stuffing. The room was suffocatingly warm, filled with the scent of roasted turkey and expensive perfume. Ashley was holding court, waving a glass of vintage wine paid for unknowingly by me. She was wearing a new diamond tennis bracelet that glittered under the chandelier. "It's just so refreshing to finally work with partners who understand vision," Ashley gushed, gesturing vaguely with her wine glass. "Chimera isn't like those stuffy banks. They get it. They know you have to spend money to make money." My father nodded, slicing the turkey with a ceremonial gravity that made me want to laugh. "Exactly. It takes a certain caliber of person to attract that kind of investment. They saw the potential in this family." Then he paused, the carving knife suspended in the air, and looked down the table at me. His eyes were heavy with pity. "You should take notes, Jordan. Look at your sister. She knows how to leverage capital. She's a builder. You're still working for wages. You're playing small ball while the adults are in the big leagues." "Maybe Chimera just likes risky bets," I said quietly, taking a sip of water. My mother sneered. "Don't be jealous. At least someone here is securing our legacy." They were eating food I paid for in a house owned by my company, wearing clothes charged to my credit line. They didn't see it yet, but they were feasting on their own financial corpse. I no longer felt insulted, only detached, like a scientist watching lab rats devour poisoned bait. 3 weeks later, the bill came due. On the night their lease payment to Chimera Holdings was due, I quietly switched the payment gateway to maintenance. Dennis tried to pay. It failed. He didn't call, he didn't document anything, he assumed the rules didn't apply to him. At midnight, the system logged the payment as missed. Automatically, Clause 42B triggered, immediate lease termination and eviction. The house was mine. So were the loans. Tomorrow, I would introduce them to their landlord. I summoned them to a compliance review. They arrived late and furious, demanding to see Mr. Sterling. I turned in my chair. "You'll deal with the chairman." Dennis laughed, until I told him the truth. I owned Chimera Holdings. I owned his debt, and he was past the eviction deadline. Slide by slide, I showed them everything. How cheaply I bought their bad debt, how they squandered operating capital on cruises and handbags, how they signed the clause they never bothered to read. "You didn't trick us," my mother whispered. "No," I said calmly. "You tricked yourselves." Dennis lunged at me in rage. Security restrained him instantly. "You own nothing," I said. "You have 1 hour to vacate before the locks change." As they were dragged out, Dennis spat one last threat, boasting about hidden Cayman accounts. I pulled out a single document, IRS Form 211. "I already reported those," I said, 12 weeks ago. Moments later, IRS criminal investigation agents entered. Dennis and Ashley were arrested for tax evasion and wire fraud. The government would seize the offshore money. My whistleblower reward would be $600,000. I walked outside into the cold air. It didn't smell like money. It smelled like freedom. I called the only person who mattered. "Pack your bags," I said. "I just bought the auto shop. We're starting over." Never underestimate the quiet one in the room. They're not weak, they're patient.